All right. I know for fans, radio fans on the east side of the state, they know Mr. Matt Dery, a man who needs no introduction, current host of the Locked On Lions podcast. And we're talking about the NFL draft on this Wednesday, April 28th, coming up tomorrow. Finally here. A lot of buildup always to the draft, but now that it's here, I know a lot of people are just kind of excited to get it over with, right?
They are, Jamal. It's exciting. I don't know about get it over with, but hey, what is this new regime going to be all about? What are they going to do in year one? And certainly with the pick at 7, the Lions are in a very precarious spot in terms of there's so many different options and places for them to go. Do they go offense? Do they trade down? I don't think they're going to go defense, but we'll get into it. I'm excited about it.
You mentioned that new regime, and we'll start right there, right off the top. I know Brad Holmes is a guy who spent a lot of time with the Rams, and people say he's a bright guy, obviously with a lot of ideas. But as you mentioned on this Locked On Lions podcast, who's calling the shots in this regime? There are a lot of people that got brought in to help a rookie GM, guys like, Joe Dorsey, former general manager of the Cleveland Browns, and maybe a guy, as you mentioned this week, like Chris Spielman, who was brought in as an advisor, but in what capacity? So as you go into the draft, do you feel that there's still questions as to who in this regime is in charge?
It's interesting. I read the Monday Morning Quarterback piece by Peter King, the Football Morning in America piece, and then the Albert Breer piece on Monday. And it's like Chris Spielman influence. And I openly questioned it on the podcast. I've got fans clawing it down my back, like screaming at me, like, what are you talking about? That's speculation. But it is true because of the history of this franchise, Jamal, and you know this, too many chefs in the kitchen, not the right chefs in the kitchen. Now you have a new, young, fresh-faced general manager coming from a winning organization. And the question has to be asked, is there going to be outside influences? Are there going to be too many voices? I think Chris has a fine voice, and he's very well respected around the league. But he doesn't have the experience personnel-wise that Brad Holmes has. So when we get to Thursday night, who's calling the shots? Like you said, and I think openly asking that question when this isn't like Johnny Blogger here. This is Albert Breer and Peter King saying, hey, listen, the Spielman influence could sway a Micah Parsons pick. Wait a minute. What if Brad Holmes doesn't think Micah Parsons is the answer? What if Sheila Ford Hamp, the owner, says, I'm not drafting a kid that was hazing guys in college and got in trouble in high school? There's a certain maybe culture that they want that maybe he's not a fit. So I think that's a question that needs to be asked. And I think we're going to get our answers this weekend on who's running this thing. And that's okay. I mean, this is a rebuild. Let's find out.
And that's a valid question about not just who's running this thing, but like you mentioned about the character concerns with Micah Parsons. I know that Lions fans see the team having the worst defense ever and think we got to address the defense. But if there's no elite defensive prospect in the top 10, which it looks like this year that there arguably isn't, then it would be, seemingly a reach to address such a need that heavy in the draft. And I wanted to ask you about that because you mentioned Micah Parsons' character concerns, and they drafted Okudah at 3 a year ago. So you got the feeling that a corner in the top 10 is not really the pick. Doesn't it seem like this team is looking at obviously all options in terms of trading down, but if they stay at 7, it'll be an offensive player?
I would assume so. Like you said, unless they really like Parsons, they've hid that from us. But there have been plenty of mock drafts and plenty of experts that think when you really look at the big board and everybody's board and the Lions are likely going to take the best player available, will they take Parsons at 7? I don't think so. Now, if they were to trade back with, let's say, Arizona at 16, Washington at 19, and Parsons is there, and you accumulate picks or you get a number 1 next year or whatever, and there you take Parsons at that spot, that I think would be understandable. But when you look at the top 10, and the Lions sit at 7, it's a lot of quarterbacks, it's a lot of receivers, if you count Kyle Pitts in that class. And then you got the 2 offensive tackles, Penei Sewell from Oregon and Rashawn Slater from Northwestern. So there's your almost top 10. Maybe the first defensive player coming off the board could be Patrick Surtain, the cornerback from Bama. But are the Lions going to take back-to-back corners, Jamal, in the top 10 in 2 years? Now, it's a new regime. It's Brad Holmes. You can't rule anything out. It's the Detroit Lions, I mean, 1 playoff win in 60-plus years, bro. It's like, hey, man, you never count out with the Lions and what they do. But I think it's a good chance they trade back, and a team like New England, Washington calls them and says, we got to come up and get Justin Fields or Lance or one of these quarterbacks. And then the Lions can accumulate picks. They only have 6 picks right now. What if you got another second round pick or another third round pick this year and a number 1 next year? I think you'd be smart to do it. And then if you can get your big tackle like Darisaw or somebody like that in the teens, if you trade back, you get your right tackle, but then you add some more picks where you continue to build this roster, which right now is very barren in a lot of areas.
I think that's why a lot of people, obviously, that Vegas isn't in the habit of losing money, but if they say that the Lions are going to win 5 games, then kind of seems to be a foregone conclusion that this roster, as it currently constructed, looks like one of the worst in the NFL. And getting picks would be a little bit different than what has happened in years past, where you've seen the Lions reach on guys at certain positions. You've seen the Lions try to address an area of need when trading down seemed to have been the smarter play. When you already look at what Brad Holmes has been able to do in getting 2 first-round picks from the Los Angeles Rams, trading down does seem to be the smart move. And would it just be credit to the new regime for pulling that off and getting more picks? Would they be able to do it?
Well, that's the unknown, and that's something that historically this franchise has not been able to do. When there have been those trade down opportunities, including last year under the unnamed Maestro general manager, the previous GM, that was the trade down. It was like trade down city. I mean, the lights were flashing. Jamal, it was trade down, trade down. No, we're going to stay at 3 and take a corner. And he didn't even play well. And the poor kid is so young. And I think Okudah will end up being fine. But man, oh man, when you have that opportunity and you let the world know after signing Chase Daniel and basically saying Matthew Stafford's going to be here forever, you weren't taking a quarterback. You lost all leverage. But I like what Brad Holmes has done and Dan Campbell to an extent. They haven't shown their hand. Their cards are close to them right now. So no one really knows where they're going to go. But when you have this kind of roster, especially on defense, that is just so, the cupboard is just so bare. You look at guys like Okudah. We think Tracy Walker will bounce back with better coaching. The linebacker spot is really bad. The D line seems to have some depth and some decent players, but again, Romeo Okwara is your best guy, at least statistically, but he's not chalking up 2-3 Pro Bowls here. Trey Flowers making a lot of money, but hasn't performed. So you have a lot of names, but what does this new regime think of that depth on the D line? You can never have enough cornerbacks. They need a safety in this draft. I'm not sure what day it'll be, but they have to draft a safety at some point. And then offensively, the receiving core is a joke. I know they've signed some guys for depth, but nobody that I'm sitting here doing cartwheels over. You love Hawkinson, and I think the running backs are getting there. And the left side of the O-line is good. And the quarterback's a question mark. So there's a need for accumulating picks and taking this year as a year 1 of a new regime and taking some lumps. The schedule's impossible. They play the NFC West and AFC North. Good luck. So you lose some games and you get back at it next year, and then you've got 2 drafts full of a lot of players that you can improve the team quicker rather than slower.
How important do you think it is, maybe not for the fans, because Lions fans are among the most patient bunch in the history of sports, but how important do you think it is for the franchise to remain patient? Because as you just addressed, there are holes all over the place. So if the Lions stay at 7, they're going to get somebody that they need because they need everything. If they trade down, you can address multiple needs. You got Dan Orlovsky on television saying they need to avoid the sexy pick of taking a quarterback or a skill position player. But let's be honest, they need wide receivers, like you just said, because there's nobody in the room that strikes heart or fear in the heart of defenses. So when you look at the fact that this team seemingly needs everything except the center and, like you said, the left side of the line, is it incumbent on the regime to remain patient and not rush this process?
No, I think they have to be patient. I think that they've openly admitted, and I respect them for doing this. They've said we're kind of rebuilding. I think at first they were a little bit hesitant to do that, but I think once you get Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell in the room, and then you trade your franchise quarterback and you let your franchise wide receiver walk for nothing. Let's be honest here. To sit here and say, well, the defense was so bad it can't be any worse. The offense might be okay. Stafford and Galladay were your horses, and they're out. And Jared Goff has regressed over the last few years. I'll say this, Jamal. If they somehow stun us on Thursday night and draft Justin Fields, if he's there, and say, hey, best player on our board, and we took him, and he's going to sit for a while. Jared's our guy, but let's see what we have. Then you're really going to have to be patient, because if Goff is decent in year one, Fields doesn't play, similar to what happened this year with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, except Aaron Rodgers was freaking amazing. Then you go into year two, and you still got Fields, and maybe he lights it up in the preseason and stuff. But then if Goff has a bad year two and you just let him walk, and it won't really hurt you from a cap standpoint, then you've got a rookie quarterback that has sat for 2 years that you like. So then that would enhance this rebuild and slow it down even more, which, as long as they're transparent, that's okay. If they say this could be a 2 to 3 year project, we may be bad for a little while. That's all right, as long as you're accumulating assets, see what you have, and not trotting out guys claiming you're going to be a 10-win football team like the previous regime that can't play. Why is Jelani Tavai, to me, is not a good football player? Seems like a great guy and works hard, but my goodness, how many more of these guys that can't play are you going to trot out there? But if you got the younger guys that are on cheaper contracts that you're going to give an opportunity to sink or swim, then at least we're looking at a plan. So be very interested in seeing what they do at 7, if they trade down. What if they took that quarterback, Jamal? This town will be going nuts. Either way, it would create quite a buzz.
And that's the, not to say problem, but that's the thing about patience, is Matthew Stafford got thrown to the Wolves right away. And as the number 1 overall pick, it made sense. You know, they had Dante Culpepper on that team, but then Stafford still played a lot as a rookie before he got hurt. You know, then you look at Joey Harrington getting thrown right out there. You know, there hasn't really been this availability in Detroit to draft a guy, let him sit, let him develop. But you're on the money. If they draft Fields, or if by some measure Trey Lance falls to the Lions at 7 or something along those lines, then yeah, this town would lose its mind thinking, okay, we finally got our guy. But then if Jared Goff goes out and gets better, now you got another trade chip, or now you have a valuable asset to use. I think that's a win-win situation. But like you said, the key regardless seems to be patience.
It does. And this fan base is fantastic. Lions fans are amazing. The response that I get on my podcast every day, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, or even some emails, is, you know, the fans want a winner. They're desperate for it. But now at least you've got a new coaching staff that is highly respected. You've got some diversity on that coaching staff, which you didn't have for the last few years. And you've got some players that are excited to play for ex-players, which I think is motivational for them. And you've got, like you said, a rookie GM that has some good people around him. John Dorsey, you mentioned before, Ray Agnew, Chris Spielman. So they're building something, and you'd rather do it that way than what we had the last few years, which was, we're the smartest guys in the room, we're going to be good, don't worry. And yet they went from 9-7 to the toilet. So I'll be interested in seeing where they go. But, you know, needs real fast, Jamal, you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to riff for you. They got to get a right tackle. They've got to get a safety. They got to get some linebackers and some receivers for sure.
Definitely. That was actually the lead to my next question, because you mentioned the experience of the guys in the front office, as we talked about already, but you have this rookie head coach in Dan Campbell that during the draft process, I think a lot of people seem to have forgotten about, because the focus has been on Brad Holmes and the focus has been on, you know, the front office. But what type of offense and defense is Campbell going to put out on the field? What does he want to see from his rookie players? So when we talk about the biggest areas of need, I think you also have to ask, what type of player is Campbell looking for? So when we talk about the linebackers and getting a right tackle, you know, or we, you know, I know that the offensive coordinator, Lynn, has mentioned wanting to be more balanced and running the football a lot more. Well, like you just mentioned, well, which tackle would you like? You know, if you know, Slater is there, or, you know, if Sewell is there, where are you going to go? So they have options. But how do you think Dan Campbell's vision kind of plays into what the Lions want to do in this draft?
That was a slip there with Matt Campbell.
Yeah, it was.
Lions liked him, and they were after him. I was told by numerous sources, but no, it's weird, because you're right. If they're going to be running the Dan Campbell offense from the 2015 Dolphins, they're going to be grounding and pounding, and it would be a Dan Campbell type pick, I would think, if Sewell or Slater are there at 7 to take that right tackle, put him on that O-line alongside Decker, Jackson, Ragnow, Vaitai, and have your O-line for the next 10 years and run the football. That to me would be a Dan Campbell type pick, especially if Penei Sewell is there at 7. I think if Sewell's there at 7, if this thing goes Lawrence, Wilson, Jones, the 3 quarterbacks, Pitts at 4, Chase at 5, and the Dolphins go receiver, the second best receiver, or somebody trades up to get another quarterback, Lance or Fields, then Sewell's there at 7. I think that they would take Sewell, but I don't know. I'm not. There's nothing etched in stone with that. But I think that would be something that would fit the Dan Campbell mode, like you said, of we're going to run the football. You know, Dan Campbell has said numerous times, I want my receivers to be good blockers downfield. You rarely hear that these days. Today is about throwing that football, man, and receivers that can get 1,000, two teams that have 2,000-yard receivers, and the wideout is so important now, and it's a wide open game, and the rules where cornerbacks can barely lay a finger on these people. So Campbell saying, I want my receivers to block, kind of tells me that what they do up front is important. Yet there have been reports that Chris Spielman feels like you got to build from the outside in. So you would want to get skill position players that are really good and then build your line. So it's a big mystery, but the Lions have done a good job of kind of keeping us guessing so far with what they're going to do tomorrow.
When you look at the later rounds of the draft, when you start to really build your depth, when you start to, most teams put together, their backups, in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. Of course, you're going to get some impact players. The Lions have traditionally whiffed on these picks in the worst way, especially in the 2nd round. I know you mentioned Tavai already. We can talk about Jordan Dizon. We can talk about a lot of guys over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Lions picked in the 2nd and 3rd round that aren't even in the league anymore.
Yep.
As you mentioned, this team needs everything. So do they have the ability to try to draft for depth, or are they still drafting starters in the 4th and 5th round?
Well, I think that they would say that they believe that they will grab a bunch of starters now. That's what Bob Quinn said last year. And to be honest, his draft last year wasn't all that bad. I mean, DeAndre Swift looks like a really good football player. Jonah Jackson looks good. Okudah, the jury's still out. But no, you want to get as many good football players in here as possible, regardless of need, position. But that's what the Rams have done over the last few years, is they got their higher end guys and then they made big time trades. So then it was like, if you're a Rams fan, boy, this is boring. We don't have a 1st or 2nd round pick because we needed those picks to trade to go get Jalen Ramsey or whomever. So, but they won. The Rams won in the 3rd round with Cooper Kupp. They won in the 4th round with Johnson and some of these later round guys. And so that's what I think you would hope the difference would be this time around with the Lions, is that Brad Holmes will hit some doubles and triples, if we use a baseball term, on day 2 and 3. And then that's where you build your depth and you find some really good football players, and they're not that costly. You got them on a multi-year deal, but they're not costing you a lot of money. And then you could take the money there and spend it in free agency smartly. So that's where the Rams have been good, is finding those guys. Ekubaum is another one, mid to late rounds that can come in and be a starter for you.
For sure. And then that's what the Lions will obviously have to do, with the more picks that they accumulate, as you mentioned, hoping to trade down and get more picks because they don't have a lot this year. But with 2 first-round picks next year, 2 first-round picks the year after that, and with the way the Rams play, those might be picks a little bit later in the draft. So, the Lions might be mining a little bit. But I think, as you mentioned, that Brad Holmes has learned from an organization that knows how to not just find those diamonds in the rough in the late rounds, but scout these players and evaluate these players and pick them up. And I think you're right. Lions fans should feel pretty good about at least that aspect of late round drafting after years of cringeworthy picks.
Yeah. And they've drafted some good players. Let's not just say that every player that they've drafted over the years in the Quinn Tricia era has been bad. Like we mentioned, Frank Ragnow is a Pro Bowler. TJ Hawkinson looks good. But you got to hit on more. There's got to be more impact players, more Pro Bowl players that come from your draft. Kenny Galladay was a Pro Bowl alternate. Like I said, this past year, Ragnow and Hawkinson busted through in an interesting pandemic year. But there has to be more. There's got to be more talent. This staff can coach them up, and I think that's a big part of it. I think they'll be better in practice. Guys' skill level will come up. I think this staff will do that. But will it translate on Sundays in the next few years? This year, I think it's going to be tough to win 5 games. I do. I would take the under in that bet. 17 games. The betonline.ag website says 5.5. I would take the under. I just think this year is going to be rough. I think the schedule's tough, and I think the team doesn't have enough talent. But what if Brad Holmes and his crew unearth some diamonds in the rough that are big-time rookies right away? That'd be great.
Yep. I agree. And I'll leave you with this one. I have a final question about that turnaround. You mentioned this year being rough. I think most people around the NFL would agree with you that it's not looking great on paper for the Detroit Lions at this point. But then you look at what the Cleveland Browns were able to do, and I know you're an Ohio guy, so you're really going to get where I'm going with this.
Yes.
You look at this team that goes 0-16, and then in a short time period later is back in the playoffs. They had their quarterback of the future set. They picked up numerous positions, and John Dorsey was big in this too. But
yeah,
is it possible in today's NFL to go from the basement to the penthouse in a quicker fashion than a 5-6 year turnaround? Do you think it's possible to do something like that and to make a push for the playoffs in 2-3 years' time?
I do, but Jamal, it's the Lions. That's the problem. The Lions' history. People could say, oh, stop with the SOL. Stop with same old Lions. Stop saying one playoff win since 1957. Wouldn't it be great if it was us and it was the Lions and they did do the quick turnaround like the Carolina Panthers 1-15 to like the Super Bowl in 2 years, or Cleveland 0-16 to 11 wins in 3 years, 2 or 3 years later? That'd be awesome. But there's just that stigma with this organization that they just can't get out of their own way. And yes, of course, the hope is you can build quicker here, but will it happen? But yeah, for sure. I think this year is going to be difficult. Schedule, everything. And then COVID, who knows if they're going to have OTAs, if it's going to be virtual. And that hurt a guy like Okudah last year. But I think, yes, to answer your question, the NFL, oh my gosh, it is easier to win right away. There's so much turnover. There's so much luck that goes into it. Tampa Bay goes from a really decent team. They get Tom Brady, a few other guys, boom, they win it all. The Kansas City turnaround. Remember when they had Scott Pioli? I think they won 1 or 2 games, fired him, brought in Andy Reid. It's possible. It is possible because there's just a lot of turnaround, and teams 1 year look like world beaters, and then the next, a few injuries, and boom, they're out of it. I mean, the New England Patriots were this, every year in the playoffs, every year winning the AFC East. And last year, what did they win? 5, 6, 7 games. I mean, they were bad. Again, they lost Tom Brady and Gronk and others, and Edelman was hurt, but that plays a role. So quick turnaround, I agree. It can happen faster. I never said 5-year plan with the Lions. The Tigers are on about a 10-year plan. The Pistons plan, I think, is moving quicker than people thought, which is cool. The Red Wings, who knows? But the Lions, it can move faster. It's the NFL. Yeah. True.
On all points, but then the caveat at the end, as everyone knows, but it's the Lions. So
yeah, man, I'm hoping for good things, and it would be great.
Most definitely. Well, thanks for joining us, Matt Dery. We appreciate it. Again, host of the Locked On Lions podcast. Make sure you check that out. Always good content there. And thank you very much for joining us, man.
All right, Jamal, anytime.